The documents within the crimson sealed envelope lay spread across Alastair's desk in his small cottage on the outskirts of Cambridge. Outside, the persistent rain had finally yielded to a ghostly fog that crept along the ground like something sentient, obscuring the boundaries between his garden and the surrounding fields. 3 days had passed since Eliza Blackwood's unexpected visit, and he had spent every evening poring over the materials she had provided. The formal offer letter, printed on the same heavy cream stock as her business card, outlined the terms of employment. 6 months of residence at Crimson Abbey, comprehensive documentation of its history, all expenses covered, half the payment up front and half upon completion of a manuscript deemed satisfactory by the client. The letter was signed simply the Thornfield Trust, with no individual names or additional contact information beyond Miss Blackwood's card. More intriguing were the preliminary materials about the Abbey itself. A slim folder contained photocopies of old maps showing the Abbey's location deep within the North York moors, several miles from the nearest village of Thornwick. Historical photographs documented the structure's evolution over the past century. Its slow surrender to nature, the collapse of the North Transept sometime in the 1940s, periodic attempts at conservation or restoration that seemed to have been abandoned mid-effort. The most detailed document was a genealogical chart tracing the ownership of the property from its secularization during the dissolution of the monasteries under Henry VIII through its acquisition by the Thornfield family in the late 17th century. The chart ended abruptly in 1927 with the name Edward Thornfield, followed by a simple notation: no direct heirs, property held in trust. What the materials notably lacked was any substantial information about the Abbey's early history, its founding, the specific monastic order that had occupied it, or the circumstances of its apparent abandonment before the official dissolution. These omissions struck Alastair as odd given the otherwise meticulous documentation of ownership. A separate note, handwritten in an elegant slanting script, had been paper-clipped to the inside of the folder. Dr. Finch. The library at Crimson Abbey contains extensive archives that have never been properly examined by modern scholarship. Among these are the journals of various Thornfield family members dating back to the 17th century, original architectural plans, and what appear to be fragments of medieval manuscripts whose provenance is uncertain. I should mention that local superstitions have attached themselves to the Abbey over the centuries, as is common with such ancient, isolated structures. The caretaker, Mr. Silas Thorne, is well versed in separating folklore from fact and will be an invaluable resource during your stay. We await your decision with great anticipation. Signed, E. Blackwood. The note's careful reference to superstitions had immediately piqued Alastair's interest. In his experience, such disclaimers often preceded the most fascinating historical discoveries, the places where documented history intersected with human fear, belief, and the inexplicable. Now, as evening settled into night, Alistair cradled a glass of whiskey and stared into the small fire he had built in the hearth. The dancing flames cast his shadow large against the wall of his study, a distorted companion to his solitude. The rational part of his mind, the meticulous scholar who had built his reputation on empirical evidence and rigorous methodology, cataloged the oddities of the offer, the anonymity of the client, the isolation of the location, the emphasis on 6 months of complete immersion, the lack of clear expectations for the final manuscript beyond documenting the history. And yet, he took another sip of whiskey. Feeling it burn a warm path down his throat, his gaze drifted to the photograph of Crimson Abbey that he had propped against a stack of books. In the firelight, the stone structure seemed to pulse with a life of its own, its Gothic arches like the ribcage of some ancient slumbering beast. His phone chimed with a text message. Roger Pembroke, a former colleague and one of the few who still maintained contact, asking if he would join a departmental dinner next week. Another evening of cautious conversation and veiled references to the unfortunate business with Harrington. Another night of watching younger academics advance their careers while his own remained in stasis. Alistair set down his glass and reached for his laptop. A quick search for Crimson Abbey yielded sparse results. Mentions in architectural surveys of medieval religious structures, brief references in works on the dissolution of the monasteries, and a few local tourism websites noting its status as private property closed to the public. One link led to a regional folklore collection where a single paragraph mentioned Crimson Abbey. The locals of Thornwick Village have long avoided the moorland path leading to Crimson Abbey, particularly after nightfall. Legends speak of a blood curse dating back to the time before the Thornfield family took possession. Details of this curse vary in the telling, but common elements include references to a great transgression against divine law, a woman suffering, and the sound of weeping heard on the moors during autumn storms. While such tales are common to many ancient structures, the persistence of these specific motifs over centuries suggests a singular historical event may lie at their core. Alistair felt a familiar, scholarly excitement building, the thrill of an intellectual puzzle, a historical mystery waiting to be unraveled. It had been years since he had felt this stirring of genuine academic curiosity. His gaze moved to the single-framed photograph on his desk, himself and Catherine on their honeymoon in Venice, her smile radiant against the backdrop of the Grand Canal. 5 years of marriage dissolved in the aftermath of the Harrington affair, her final accusation still echoing. You love dead histories more than living people, Alistair. He closed his laptop and reached for Eliza Blackwood's card. The call was brief and to the point. Miss Blackwood seemed unsurprised by his acceptance, as though she had anticipated no other outcome. Arrangements would be made immediately. A car would collect him and his belongings at the end of the week. She would ensure the university was informed of his extended research leave. One question, Miss Blackwood, Alastair said before ending the call. The name of the caretaker, Thorn. Any relation to the Thornfield family who owned the Abbey? A moment of silence stretched before she answered. History often leaves its echoes, Dr. Finch. I'm sure you'll find that Crimson Abbey has preserved more than its fair share of connections to the past. After hanging up, Alastair returned to the fire, watching as a log collapsed in a shower of sparks. He felt as though he had just committed to something far beyond a simple research project, as though he had set in motion machinery that had been waiting, patient and immutable, for precisely this moment. Outside, the fog pressed against his windows like pale, seeking fingers, and somewhere in the distance an owl called a single, haunting note into the darkness.